All right. It's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'd like to announce that the meeting is being recorded. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yes, Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Flaherty,
Here.
Director Bertrand is absent, Director Freeman,
Here.
Director Aguilar, Director Topliff,
Here.
Director Deschler.
All right. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Now we're going to move to the consent agenda. Do any directors have items they wish to pull? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Motion made by Deschler. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Topliff. Any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Brandt, Flaherty,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Deschler,
Yes.
Topliff,
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes too. Motion passes 6-0. So at this time, we're going to go to the public comment period. This is the chance for any member of the public to speak on a matter that's not on tonight's agenda. You can do that by hitting the raise hand button or putting something in the chat for us to see, and we'll call on you. Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda tonight? Right, seeing none, we will close the public comment period. We're going to move to our first action item, the Ivcsd Community Events and Programs Manager job description.
Let me get my screen shared. Do you want to do the public comment now or after for this one?
Sure, let's go ahead and just open up public comment on this item.
Okay.
Are there any requests to speak from anyone here this evening?
We did have the one sent in, I can read.
Sounds good. Go ahead and read that.
It's from Carmen Lodis. It says, "Dear friends, I'd like this to be read during the public comment period. Thank you. I'm unable to check into the CSD meeting this evening, but I'd like to go on record opposing the establishment of, let me admit, Sydney, opposing the establishment of the Ivcsd Community Events and Programs Manager job description hiring schedule at this time. About 70% of the CSD's constituents are away from town or involved with other urgent matters at this time of the year. Yet this job was posted December 1 and will be chosen only some 30 days later. Again, while few of the district's constituents are in town. While this is a critically important position for the CSD, it is a highly paid position, $24 an hour plus 9% retirement benefit. However, this looks like someone has already been chosen, and it is someone who is close to someone involved with the CSD. No one wants a scandal at this time. All I'm suggesting is that the hiring schedule be delayed to begin in January when the town is full again. I don't believe there's anything so urgent that requires this position to be filled at the beginning of January."
All right, thank you for reading that, Jonathan. Do you want to go ahead and introduce this item now?
Definitely. So this is the job description for the Isla Vista Community Events and Programs Manager. It is a job that's designed to meet our critical needs right now for the operation of the Isla Vista Community Room and Isla Vista Community Center. This position is $24 an hour full-time, 40 hours per week. With opportunity to advance. That's going to receive the full-time benefit, which is a platinum PPO, the 9% retirement contribution, and the full-time benefit of the 12 paid holidays and the winter recess and the 15 vacation days per year. So it's a full-time job with the Ivcsd. It is, the Isla Vista Community Center Director position we chose not to fill. And this position will more directly meet our needs as a district in fulfilling our board goal 1 of reopening the Isla Vista Community Center. So just to go into some of the differences, the job is really narrowed down to focus on these 3 aspects, which are working with our partners to make sure that the users of the spaces have excellent customer service and are accommodated in their reservations of the space, and making sure that there's a really vibrant reservation calendar, and also working with our partners to initiate our own programming in the space that we've determined over the time that is strategically necessary, whether it's bringing back the Zumba classes we've had or other services. And then they implement the data collection and feedback to keep track of all this. And that's really for those of you who were on the board at the time in 2017 and 18 and even into 2019, this is just very similar to what Paulina's job was with the CSD at that time. She was it was when we had the grant with Isla Vista Youth Projects, and her role was titled Community Room Coordinator. And so I mirrored that. And so we're kind of going back to square one and starting from that level again, like we did in the past, which is starting with this community events and programs manager, and building up from there instead of building from the top down for this service. So there will be some other roles that this position will take on, which are more, they've been shifted towards the assist. So the general manager will take on the responsibility, but they'd work with me on them rather than taking the lead. But they take the lead on the reservations process, the bringing in the programming, and the data collection and measurement of how many people attended, what kinds of events we're having. So that, and because that's what the core elements are right now, that's what we really need done, is the management of the reservations and the communication with partners to make sure they're brought into the space. And in that sense, I narrowed down the skills and knowledge portion too, in terms of what we're looking for, since it's more of an entry-level job than a director level position, which is a higher leadership role. And then, yeah, I will address the dates. There is no one already selected for this. It's just important to have someone ready to start at the beginning of the year, because there is a continually higher rate of interest in using the spaces, and we want to be able to serve the public. And it's about having good public service in using these spaces, and that's not feasible to do with the current staff structure. So, we've had an advertisement for this kind of role for quite some time, and we will be, reaching back out to people who apply to the previous positions who'd be free to apply for this. And I'd just say too that almost in the last hiring cycle, all our applicants came in the first couple of weeks anyway. So for this job, I do feel that the 2 weeks is enough. And if it's not enough, we'll of course continue it, because we have that ability to, but I honestly believe it's the best for our public service to have a job filled sooner rather than, by the end of February or by the beginning of February. It'll we'll lose a whole month out of the new year at that point of having someone. So, but I'm open to changing that if that's what you all are thinking. But I do feel confident that we'll get our best applicants in the first couple of weeks of people who are interested. So that is the presentation, and I'd be open to questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any questions from board members? Director Deschler.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One is, it's a full-time position, and but it's not a salary position.
Yes, sorry, I didn't clarify that. It's an hourly job.
but it's 48 hours a week.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand why do you make a choice between doing a salaried 40 hours 40 hours a week job versus an hourly job? I don't know. Yes, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted.
Well, my logic was that our other program manager role is hourly, and we don't have salary ranges right now for program manager. It's an hourly level. It's an hourly level, just like job title. So I kept it on par with what we have for our other program manager in terms of that piece of it. I think it's also the hourly could be helpful because this position will work at different hours of the day as well. And so that's another reason behind it.
Is the other program manager 40 hours a week?
They're 20 hours a week.
Yeah, it seems very strange that it's a full-time position and yet it's an hourly position. I'm not an HR person, so I mean, maybe Ross could weigh on that, but that seems weird to me. Unless you think that they're going to be working less hours, but if they're expected to work 40 hours, I don't know. That's weird to me. Anyways, the other thing is, I'll just say that's weird. The other thing I wanted to ask is, why did you choose to make the position a program manager as opposed to, if this was more entry level, making it the coordinator, which is what it was before?
Well, program manager, I think, is our entry level. Like for us, that's what our entry level is. Like that's the Compost Collective role as a program manager and an entry level as well. So that's just for us, yeah.
Got it. And then I wondered how this position will interface with the community engagement director. So I didn't see that as much in the job description.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I could have added more of that into the job description. I think they will have an active working relationship because, yeah, I'm not putting it on this position to do the main advertising and promotion for the community center. It'll be part of our, sorry, let me let Carrie back in.
Oh.
She would want to hear this too. So Sydney would still be the point person for our marketing and engagement on this front, but they'll need to work hand in hand though, because part of it is working with our partners, and Sydney's already cultivated a lot of those relationships already. So, but this person would need to have them too, because they're going to be working one-on-one. So it'll be a collaborative relationship. And that's how I think all of our positions are with, for example, Carly working at the Compost Collective works with Sydney on the marketing and promotional aspects of the Compost Collective, for example.
And then my last question is, what is $24 an hour equate to a salaried position?
Yes, I can get you that number. Give me 1 second. I can get you that number very, very quickly. Let's see. I should have had this up. There it is. Okay, so it would be about 52,000. I'm trying to, let me see. It would be $29,000 as a salary through the rest of the year if we hired in December. And so I'm just trying to do the monthly breakdown here and get you a full number. 40.
I knew somebody would figure this out really quickly.
48.
So, Mark says,
there it is. Mark did it.
Yay, Mark.
Yeah, well, for us it would be 52. It would actually be 49,920.
Yeah, and then without benefits, that's what Ross just said.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can set that too. If the preference is for a salaried role, we can do that. we don't have a range for that, but we can just put that as the exact salary. Maybe just put 50,000 to round it up.
Well, it's interesting because you say it's 40 hours and then it's hourly, so that they're going to be working a salaried position essentially, but then you have room for advancement. And I just don't know what that means. Does that mean another role for them?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what that means.
Oh, definitely. And so
Okay.
I should talk about that more. That's what kind of I insinuated when I said let's build from the bottom up instead of from the top down for this part of our organization. This person might want to become the director eventually. They might not want to, but we'll see if they're performing well in their role. We would certainly look to, consider them for that role. Obviously it'd be an open application period, but this is not the top of the organization for the community center structure. There will be a director position eventually hired, and this person would have the opportunity to apply for that and advance into that role if they chose and if we chose them.
So, okay, so then my last question is, so then you envision that at some point there'll be a program manager and a program director?
Yes, and that's the structure we used to have. And, that's what I was going to get to that the opposite way, which is director and then program manager support. And it could be that we move to the director and we then decide that let's split this up into 2 20-hour-a-week jobs, because that's what works better in supporting the director in the future. So it's obviously not set in stone, but I do envision that this is not it for the community center organization, because one person is not enough, but this is enough to get started and start serving the public.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
I might have comments more than questions, but
Okay, let me ask a question first, Jonathan, because this role, being a manager, is similar to the compost collection manager. Can you describe an evaluation of how that recruitment process went in terms of like how many applicants we got, what types of applicants? Obviously, I think from what I've heard, the reports from you that you've shared with us, very satisfied with the hire that we made in that role. So, it seems like it turned out well, but how did you feel the recruitment process went?
Yeah, I'm pulling up so I can get you the exact number. I'll say Carly Mardo, our program manager, is really excellent in her role, and so I really appreciate everything she does for us. So we were doing the hiring for the Compost Collective program manager in May, June. So that's a lot, and it was an entry-level job for people. So we did get a good number of applicants. It was 12 or 11 is how many we got, but there were a lot of them were very qualified and competitive applicants. So we interviewed almost all of them, I think. And it was a tough decision because we had so many good applicants. So I think that it was a good hiring process, even though there was a lower level of applicants where, for the community engagement director role, we had 36 applicants, but that was a full-time salaried role. However, I'll just say again that the Compost Collective role, it was very competitive and tough to pick, and the person we picked is high caliber.
Thanks for that.
I guess I do actually have sort of a question.
Okay, go ahead, Director Freeman.
Jonathan, you mentioned that there's elsewhere in our organization that we have this split between director and manager for other programs. Can you describe where that is and how this analogously will map to the future state where you anticipate there being a director in addition to a manager dealing with the community center?
Yeah, no, I don't know if I said that specifically. We don't have that anywhere else. That's what would be planned here. And that's how it was in the past when Diana was the director at IV Youth Projects and Paulina was the coordinator for the community room. And then she got promoted to assistant director eventually as well. But that's not something that was within our organization, but we were funding it.
When that was happening, when we were using IV youth projects, were those, I'd kind of gotten the impression that the reason why they had that structure was because of the HR overhead of having, if you're going to bring on a lower level employee, you have to allocate some manager time in order to manage them as part of the organization, not necessarily that there was somebody who was directing the program and then somebody who was separately lower than them doing other, and like they were both working on the program. It was more that one person was working on management as a fractional time component of that contract, and one person who was actually doing the work. So I would have expected that would map into our organization, where we would not need that. I mean, we wouldn't have a full position, at least, as that that manager level. Terms are a little weird here, but like I'm talking about the manager level, so the director position. And then we would just have the full position be what you're calling this manager position, that's managing the program. And then it would be a shared duty of HR management and oversight, potentially an assistant general manager that would be doing all of these things you're talking about at this higher level. So I'm a little confused still why.
Yeah.
It just feels like a lot of people to bring on for this, but
Right. Let me explain a little bit from what was the case last time. So we had Paulina hired first. She was hired in like 2018 with IV Youth Projects, of course, but she was the community room coordinator, and all she was doing was handling reservation requests, responding to them, making sure people had their key. Had some liaison with the Zumba instructor, for example, made sure that there were sign-in sheets, but that's it. That's what she was doing, and making the reports to the board on 90 hours of use this month, if some of you remember those. We then hired a director, not to manage her, really. It was to work on the strategic, the fundraising, to plan for the growth of the program. So it was
already then we were talking on our side. Not I remember there being two people on their side, and there was on the contract negotiation, we were always confused as to why we were having the two different lines. So it's like past each other. Okay, so yeah, so on our side, so what was the director on our? I guess I kind of anticipated the director on our side would take over the component on what we're doing with the youth projects.
Yeah, we never.
Now continue.
So we never hired a director on our side.
We were intending to, though.
We were intending.
This was the position you were just talking about that we were intending to.
Sorry, Jay, I'm confused.
I'm really confused. I'm really confused. Okay, so before I remember there being two people who both worked for IV Youth Projects.
Yes.
Did we ever have somebody working for us?
No.
Okay, so then I misunderstood what you were then saying. We were intending to bring on the director, not to manage the other person. I definitely understood that, because I was under the impression that we were dropping IV Youth Projects and we were bringing it in-house. And so the person we were going to have here certainly wasn't going to manage the person over there. The person we were going to have here was going to do the job.
Yeah, IV Youth Project is totally out of the equation. I was just using an example. Yeah. So this position will be the role that's handling reservations and working with vendors to, like the Zumba instructor, making sure people have their keys, tracking use of the room, just like Paulina's old position, which was in place for a year and a half, almost 2 years.
And this is the position that when we were talking about this before and we were calling it the director, that was the person we were going to bring in to replace Pauline to do all of those tasks. No?
No, the position that we did not hire for. So, this year we had an assistant general manager community programs position, right? And we didn't hire for that. And that was like a high level role to run all our community programs, compost, gardens, community center, all that, community festival, that whole section, but really focusing on the community center. We didn't hire that role. We then put out a community center director, a specifically community center director position that had a lot of these job description, but more. Like they had the strategic element, the fundraising element, the grant writing element, that we didn't hire for that job either. So we removed that section of the job again, and now we're focusing on just the core part that we need to get done right now, which is reservations and programs.
When we bring on somebody in the future to do the higher level position, this might be just a poor confusion that I'm having. Is that person going to be doing what the original position was going to do, which is going to be grant writing across all programs, or as opposed to just for the community center?
It's something we'll need to work on and decide. I think we'll want grant writing across all our community programs, but right now just the community center has a grant writing budget. But we do want grants for all our programs. Carly works on grants right now for the Compost Collective, for example, already. So we'll need to rethink the structure, but I do still see it as being eventually something like a community center director, and then maybe 2 managers who are part-time or people who are supporting, because as the number of reservations grows and the number of programs grows, you'll just need more people on the ground being able to be there. And in the past there had been talk of, can we have someone there always, just so the door can be open and people can drop in, and that takes more than one staff person to be able to do something like that. So right now I think I'm focused on getting this job hired so that we can accomplish what's necessary. And if we promote this person to a director, that's one area where we can go, and then they can have interns or part-time people working to support, or we can go into a different direction with the structure. But at this
You're
point,
actually anticipating having at least 3 people who will be doing this.
No,
This,
that's
community
just
center
a
specific tasks.
hypothetical. It was just a hypothetical. There could be other people.
Well, I
But-
guess to the extent to which we're trying to hire people, I would kind of maybe expect there to be some kind of strategic plan of what the org chart that we want to have is,
Yes.
and then what the hires that we hire now, how they will be able to either transition or fit directly into the org chart that we're anticipating to obtain in the future.
Yes.
And then at the current level, whether or not we actually have work for the people that we're hiring at the various points. And I guess I'm a little bit concerned that we actually, do we not have that strategy in going forward, that you're trying to that this is just part 1 of a multi-phase plan that 2 years from now you'd expect to bring on a certain number of other people, or because.
Yeah, so I think I kind of covered that. The idea is that this would be one position in a structure that would eventually have a director. I don't anticipate that being very soon. I want to have this position operate. So I do think that there is a structure in this area of a director and then program manager who is on this level of being on the ground, a director who eventually is working on fundraising, strategic, who's working on the long-term growth of the community center.
Just for the community center.
Yes. And the community room, for all those programs.
The community spaces.
Community spaces, yeah. I mean, that's the idea, is we had that community center director role and we're choosing not to fill it. I think we eventually do want to fill a role like that. But right now, this role, we might have filled this role eventually in 6 months because we had a need. It might have come up that we needed this or not. But it was always the idea that, in my mind, we would get back to that, at least 2 people supporting this program, which we had been at before COVID. So whether you
Before
hire
COVID, those 2 people
were
were at least 2 people supporting this program. Those 2 people both having worked for youth projects.
I mean, yes, those 2
Okay.
roles, we should eventually have 2 roles as well. One higher level and maybe 2
the
lower
youth
level.
projects role, I thought, and that's going back to I was under the impression that when at youth projects they had 2 roles, and one of them was a part-time manager component that you add into contracts in order to make certain that your organization doesn't take on a person and then have an intrinsic cost associated with making certain that person actually comes to work and does their tasks and has to be replaced at some point, and there's HR related to it. And I remember those conversations with youth project, because we were actually concerned, this line item, why is this line item on here? Is this expensive? And they were very defensive about the idea of, well, you can't just expect us to bring on an additional person without having a part-time manager component. But
No,
Jay, can I
I'm
jump
sorry.
in here, actually, Jonathan and Jay, because I think I might be able to bring a little bit of clarity. What you're talking about, Jay, is called cost recovery. And it is the fee that a contracting organization assesses when they have a program that they're managing in order to recover the executive costs of management. And so what you're talking about was the cost recovery of the executive staff at IVYP for the community center directors. So managing the community center director role. And so that's not applicable here because it's a sunk cost in Jonathan's salary to manage all of the employees of the organization.
I absolutely agree. So then the question is, do you remember there being 2 people who were working at IV Youth Projects as the director, or do you only remember 1? I remember 1 and then cost recovery on a manager.
No, Jay, there were 2 full-time employees, a director and an assistant director who was a coordinator before being promoted. And there were 2 full-time people, Diana and Paulina. They were both working there. Paulina was our intern who then became into that role of community room coordinator full-time for almost 2 years. And Diana worked there for 9 months. And Paulina was eventually promoted to assistant director before they both left the organization when COVID started.
And you do feel that we need, this feels like a lot of people to be allocating towards this, and it does not feel particularly like earlier in the conversation, we're talking about the need to have 3 people. You back it down to just at least 2. But I'm still not certain, because I would like to be able to understand in the scope of our long-term budgeting for the entire district and all the different things we want to accomplish, what percentage of that is going to go into people that we're hiring in order to manage the community center, and how this hire fits into that picture of all of those people that we're going to have to run all the different programs that we're trying to juggle, which including the rental housing coordinate, the mediation program, is including the composting programs, including all these other things that we're bringing on. And so I'm just not seeing it. I guess maybe what I would just need in order to deal with all this confusion, in order to feel comfortable with this, would be some kind of future anticipated org chart that has dotted lines around the hires that we anticipate needing in the future, solid lines around the ones that we have now, and then some kind of color shading of indicating people who are coming online currently, so that we can get some kind of impression of how this organization is going to get structured, which will also allow for an ability to understand the salary ranges as they all fit together, so that we can see how the how the different people relate to each other and their respective salaries, as well as the amount of cost that we're spending on each of the programs going forward, to make certain that we don't end up essentially over budget because we overgrew the community center program quickly because we were excited about it, or we undergrew something because we brought somebody in who had a particular position that had a narrow job focus, and then we're trying to figure out how to slot them into something that was a bigger picture later. I'm just not seeing it. I'm sorry to have used so much time on this trying to discuss it, but it seems important to me.
Let me address this. So this is we're not gonna overgrow. I will not do that to the organization. This is, I think, the cheapest way to grow right now. We need to get this work done. I said 3 people. That was hypothetical, and I was saying 2 part-time, so you can split this position into 2 in the future if we wanted to do that, which we might not. This position is a singular position. I think we will always need a position like this. It might be part-time work, it might be full-time work. We will need someone managing the reservations and working with the program partners. This program manager role might get, in my mind, could be promoted into a director, and then they would still need support. I don't think one person can do it on their own. They might need interns. I have ideas on how that might work, but we're not going to grow the organization beyond what we can afford. And our budget process is coming up, and we'll need to be talking about that at that point too. But in terms of for this fiscal year and where we keep going, it is totally doable. If we only hired this role and we did not budget for any more than this, we could at least run the community center and community room at that, I don't want to call it base level. I think it's more than base, but we could run it at a high quality level with just this position. We might want to grow though beyond that, and we might not. But I think this position is the minimum position we need to run the community center and community room. I think there's no doubt in my mind about that. I think there could be benefits of having a higher level position in this for this program area. And that's something, like you said, we do need a strategic growth plan. And I want to get to the board a staff structure outline. I've workshopped ideas with individuals in the past, but I want to get something full to the board. But like I said, this position is going to be necessary to run this area of the organization. We had already thought of it as a director at a higher level at 80,000 a year, and we did not make that higher, but we still need a role to do, especially these first three parts of the job description, no matter what. So I think as we grow, we're going to keep an eye on how this position's working, if they're overburdened or not. And we will continue to have a plan that adapts. I mean, I don't want to there's no set in stone plan. I don't think that would be right either right now, but I think at the minimum, we need this role, and we'll learn from how it operates.
Thank you. I'm sorry to waste so much time on that. I do have one other comment. I don't anticipate anyone will agree with me, so we'll just make the comment so that it's on the record and as far as how I'll be voting on this. This job title has now shifted over time, such that it before was very focused on the idea of working on the community center, and is now the Isla Vista Community Events and Programs Manager. I'm certain everyone can see where I'm about to go with this. I feel like this is a mission drift, both for this position as well as, and I appreciate one of the board goals, but a mission drift for how the staffed organization will operate. That you bring somebody into this position and they will anticipate that they will be wanting to spend a lot of their time working on doing events and programs. Now, the job description, I don't think is horribly out of line. The job description, I feel, it aligns a lot with what we had talked about previously, but the title to me makes it feel like you will be organizing and throwing events and things like that. I also feel, just from the perspective of that title, that it has an overlap with the recreation coordinator at the Isla Vista Recreation and Parks District. I continue to feel that we need to, if nothing else, just from a political idea, but I use political in the loose term that you might have inside of a company, or just in general, but like to have some kind of boundary that we all keep in mind between work that they do and the work that we do, whether we legally can do something or not. And I continue to always have complaints about that. But even if we can legally do something, the idea that you respect the idea that there's somebody else who does that one thing and we do something else, along with the idea that just from the perspective of government and the people in the public paying tax money to go to these organizations, and if you have two government organizations that overlap in location that have similar functionality and are doing similar things, you can run into various problems, one of which being I talked to mom and she told me I couldn't do this, so I talked to dad and he said I could, and you end up with this kind of like weird split function of government of two different groups that are both being elected by people to accomplish something, and then are coming to differing agreements over what those things can be done. So I'm not comfortable with the idea of now hiring somebody into the Isla Vista Community Events and Programs Manager as a job title. Again, I do think that the job description isn't that out of line, but I will be voting no on this in solidarity with all the other things that I've voted no on related to this, including going back to that board goal of putting in place the organized community stakeholders to imagine and implement regular programming for nightlife, arts, and culture.
Thank you for that, Director Freeman. Are there other questions from board members? Before we do that, I have a question for council about the power to operate community facilities. Is the power to plan events in community facilities a part of that power?
Yeah, it is, and this has come up a couple of times. So again, I want to make clear that what I'm hearing from Director Freeman is a question on policy implementation, not on legality. And the legal aspects of the district's powers are set forth in Government Code Section 61250. And the district has the express power to operate community facilities. And there are examples that are given. They're not examples of limitation. They're examples to provide clarity as to the types of community facilities, but they're not exclusive. And as we've talked about before, there is some overlap in the powers activated for Ivcsd in how far, or I shouldn't say how far, but for example, and be able to provide some level of recreation as a function of providing community services like the ones that are set forth in 61-250. So, if there are concerns about overlap and respecting boundaries, as Director Freeman has indicated, certainly those are policy discussions and policy decisions that the board, elected and appointed officials, are here to make. The legality of programming spaces and community facilities is there, but how far and to what extent is a policy question that the board makes and implements.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't want to spend any more time on that question because I think we've hashed it out. Director Deschler.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment because it was something that I thought of too when I saw this, the job description. I think the title of the job description doesn't, to me, it just, like, we put community and everything, but it just doesn't really say that it's for the community, it's for facilities. It's talking about events and programs manager, and it just doesn't seem like it really is very clear that it's for the community center. And I don't know, I think it's a long title, and I think it's kind of wordy, and I do worry about when you bring in someone in a director position, how you're going to differentiate between the community events and programs manager. I just think it's a long title, and I think it would be better if it was more focused on the facilities as opposed to programs. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Director Deschler. Director Topliff. I think you're on mute.
I also felt like Director Freeman made a very good point, and I do also support changing the title.
Director Flaherty.
Yeah, I think, would that be something that could be easily changed in this meeting to reflect like specific facility usage? Like, could we change that and then vote on it in the same meeting?
I think so. We just need to decide on something. Would community center programs manager work?
Does that work, my
one thing I want to say is that the position is not a facilities manager. They're not, I mean, they're managing the events and the facilities, but they're not a facilities manager. It's like a totally different role. It's a, maintenance kind of implication. So I don't want to get those kind of applicants. I want to get people who are, programs and can work with users and stuff. So community center, and I considered community center and room programs manager, but that's even longer. So
I don't know if
there's something about saying program manager that makes me think that they're actually managing the programming very directly in a very hands-on way, as opposed to being somebody who, for example, works on scheduling.
Well, they are going to manage programs directly. Like, they're going to make sure we have Zumba classes back. They're going to make sure because part of it is reservations and part of it is our partnerships to bring in specific programs that we think are important. That's always been our goal.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I want to step in and kind of take a step back because I think maybe if we did want to tweak the wording, maybe programming manager might be a little bit more clear about what the intention is. But I do want to step back and just say to the board, this is a position that is almost identical to the position that we started out with when we first became managers of the community room. For those of you who remember, we were sort of thrown into the role of managing the community room in 2017 because we did not have any funding. And the agreement that we struck with the county is that we would operate and activate the community room space, manage the reservations, and eventually, hopefully, implement some programming there that was in-house in exchange for having office space in the building. it turned out that that was a win-win for us because we were able to get a lot of experience on the staff side and build that capacity to implement this programming and build a space that the community was utilizing very highly before COVID hit. Now we're in kind of a similar situation where we've struck an agreement with the county to operate the community center, and we need someone to run the reservation system and start to build the capacity to manage our in-house programming that will occur there. And a couple of months ago, our hope was that we could get an employee that would both manage that day-to-day operations and also start to look after the high-level thinking about growing the community center, about building a space, getting grants, improving the space, coming up with strategic plans for our board to recommend different investments or policy changes for us. And what we realized is that that approach wasn't going to be successful at this time, and that we have a very clear and present need right now, because we have now signed the agreement with the county and taken over the reservation management of this space. Just 2 weeks ago, we voted on policies for people that do use the space when they reserve it to try and make a clear and concise description and set of expectations for users of the space. And so I can understand the feeling, I felt that this is, unfortunately, has turned into a little bit of a moving target for us as we've gone back and forth on what we're hoping we can get out of this role. But I think that the way that it is constructed is in absolute keeping with our needs at this time and with the approach that we had in the past when we first took over the community room. So I just wanted to throw that out there, maybe to step back and give some perspective, because I know it can be easy for us when we see these things to start going in and trying to edit and wordsmith stuff on the fly. But I wanted to try and give the higher level analysis that I'm feeling right now. So appreciate you letting me take that privilege to cut in line in front of Director Topliff. Go ahead, Director Topliff.
I just was going to say, based on the discussion, I think a community center scheduling manager works.
Thank you for that comment. Are there other comments from board members? All right, so not seeing
I
any.
accidentally stepped on Catherine earlier. I want to make certain to make space for making certain that she gets what she wanted to say said.
Oh, never mind. Thank you, though.
Did you have something that you want to share?
Oh, I was just gonna, a space could be used, like community space, if we were trying to avoid like community center explicitly, but I don't know, it was very small.
Yeah, it is hard because I hear what Jonathan says too. When we use the word facilities, it sounds like they're doing maintenance, or at least that's what I think of when I see a facilities in a job description. So,
but what about if you add operations? Does operations have the same connotation? It's a word, Spencer, that you used when you were describing the role.
Well, I'd want to hear what Jonathan thinks, but I think I might have been a little Slavic with my language there. I think it's programming. Yeah. That's how it was in 2017 when we first had this role, and I think that's still how it is now.
It's programming, but it seems like it's also administrative. And the title makes it seem like it's more managerial, creating events, creating programming. But it seems like there's a very much of an administrative component to this as well.
So administrative programming, it's not an administrator though.
No. I mean, I don't want to wordsmith either, but I don't want to wordsmith it. I really do. But I also think the title doesn't seem to really match up with the job description.
If put some of these pieces together, community spaces operation manager, or just community spaces operation.
Jonathan, how would something like that sound to you? What's your
Isla Vista Community Spaces Operations Manager? That would work. I think that would work because it's partially, we wanted to reflect the job, and it's the title is the main marketing piece for getting applicants too. It's what in our past recruitments are like, yeah, it's the title that really grabs people sometimes to get the good applicant to open it up. So community spaces, I think that would work. Community spaces operations manager. I could live with that for sure.
And you could even say, if you really wanted to, make sure everyone was happy, you could say community spaces operation and program manager.
Wasn't one of the things you wanted was to make it shorter?
I know, but I'm a very wordy person. That's my problem. Look at poor Marcus. Just say something, Marcus.
We have to do hiring like this with UCSB all the time, and the more words you put in, the less people apply, in my opinion, because this is really confusing now. Community spaces operations and programming manager. It went from like 4 nouns to 6.
Okay, I retract programming.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Marcos. I generally agree with you that less is more.
Also, I mean, what is the main purpose of our like parentheses title? Is that the real title? Is that what we're actually going to refer to this person as? Because I think that that's the best title present, the best one I've read or heard since the meeting has began.
The program manager is like the yes, it's like the classification of the job. So if we want to do Isla Vista Community Spaces program manager, that could also be more fit neatly in our naming scheme.
I think that makes sense. Take out operations, just do community spaces. That brings the community center as well as the community room together. That seems good to me.
All right, no, that's really good.
I want to underscore how important it was that Catherine actually provided the opinion, because it is now what is becoming the consensus on the title.
Yeah, I'll just post it in the chat, but you're probably on the doc too.
Community spaces sounds galactic. I like it. Okay, so I think I like where this is. I also just want to thank staff for putting together the job description and for putting together this approach, because I recognize this is an emergent need that we need to get figured out in order to allow the public to access this important service. And I think that this is a good approach for us to try and accomplish that goal in a very timely manner. And I don't want to minimize Director Freeman's concerns, although I don't agree with everything that you said. I do appreciate the just the concern of wanting to make sure that we have a plan for this moving forward, especially because it has been a little bit of a moving target. And so maybe that's something that we can talk about at a future meeting when we're agendized to talk about it. Jonathan, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we probably need to talk about our staff structure, and maybe not at a future meeting, but at a retreat in January at this point, where we can go and have an in-depth conversation on our jobs and ideas for growth. So it's all ideas right now, but I think we have some structure and we should review that and see where we can go.
Excellent. Okay, we've talked a lot. I'll open it up for members of the public. If there's anyone in the public that wants to weigh in on this job description, please hit the raise hand button or put something in the chat. All right, not seeing any comments, so I'll bring it back to the board. I think we're ready for a motion. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move approval of, okay, I will move approval for the Isla Vista Community Services Program Manager position to be posted. How's that?
There's been a motion that's made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. I will just add one more thing too. I want to address the public comment that was received because I think it comes from a place of great care. I think, Carmen, if you are watching from the comments that you've heard tonight, I'm sure you're aware that this is a very urgent need for us to get this position into place so that we can allow you members of the public to be able to reserve the system. And where our previous approaches failed, like so many other organizations and companies and employers that I'm talking to, it's a struggle to hire folks right now for some of these positions. And so I think this approach will be yield better results and get us where we need to be in a timely manner. So, but I just want Carmen to know I appreciate his comments. So with that, I think let's go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Deschler,
Yes.
Topliff,
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thanks everyone for that robust discussion. I'll issue a challenge coin to all of us. When we see future job descriptions, let's wordsmith by email in communication with Jonathan beforehand. Myself included. I know we're all coming back from holiday break, so we all get a pass tonight. Let's move to the next item on our agenda, which is the Spring Festival 2022 memo. I'll have Jonathan introduce it first. I just want to say myself and Catherine and Carrie had a great meeting last week where we spoke a little bit about what we want to see out of a festival or event to activate our community and provide that alternative programming during Deltopia of next year. And I don't know, Catherine or Carrie, if you have anything you want to add before the staff report?
A lot of it is included in the staff report, so maybe I'll make a comment after if something's missed, but thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Great. So definitely excited to present this staff report today. We did have a productive meeting about this, and we have been working on this since our inception. So it's great to take it to this next level. I just want to do a side comment that the STEP grant really did its job in capacity building and just giving us this RFP methodology and structure. So definitely was a great thing to do. So I think this is going to benefit us moving forward. So the executive summary here is that since we've been formed as a district, it was in Measure R as well. We've had the goal of safer and fun community events and festivals that make large weekends safer and healthier for the community. We've done multiple surveys and studies in the past, which are linked in this staff report. And we had a full plan for an event in April 2020 that we canceled on March 10th. So we have invested a lot of our time and effort into this issue over the many years. And we have taken recent action. We had our Halloween events this year, which were successful. And we've done some outreach and marketing during large weekends to promote safety and get good information out to the public. But we haven't been able to do our, we've still been building towards our full plan, which had almost been in place. If it were not for COVID-19, I think would have been a very successful event in April 2020. And just to cover that very quickly, it was a $70,000 to $80,000 budget planned to be in Anascoya Park, produced by Lucidity, partnered with UCSB and City College. To have a locals only music festival in that park. So that's where we were at back in 2020, and what a lot of our surveys and studies and outreach had led us to. But like I said, we did have successful events in Halloween for 2 years in a row. We had our virtual Halloween at home event last year. And we also had the costume contest and pumpkin carving contest and Haunt the Loop this year. So we have moved forward. And also the board has been now more interested in looking at reforms to the festival ordinance, which, as we saw in planning for Halloween this year, did create limitations for some of the creative ideas that the community had for events this year that would have been safe, would have been fun, and would have been in line with goals for these weekends. But the community was hindered by this ordinance. So that has been like the dual process here. Is both the ordinance was talked about. Our committee didn't get to talk about that too much. And we really talked a lot about this RFP, but it is something that we keep in mind, is that we'll need to also address the ordinance as well. But this is, I think, the best summary of what our goal is here. Is we want to put together a request for proposals to hire a consultant who's going to do the event planning and production, and we will be heavily involved. We'll provide a lot of support like we had planned to last time. Oversight, community engagement. Now, since we have Sydney hired, we have that can be in-house, and also bringing in the involvement of other partners in the community like we had done last time. So some of the objectives that our committee outlined, I think is great. We put them now in this bullet point format. We've had these on our mind, but it's provide fun and safe options for entertainment, community building, celebration of the positive aspects of Isla Vista, supporting our businesses, taking control of our own narrative, and keeping it safe and keeping it local. And so the deliverables that we're looking for in this event planning consultant would be that they organize music performances with local bands. We specifically said we wanted to be local bands from Isla Vista. Creating site plans and operation plans for the public spaces that would potentially host this festival. So, we're just putting examples here of, these have been all places we've talked about in the past: the street, the parks, the other temporary community facilities, art facilities. So whatever we decide as the locations or whatever we're able to work out, that they would create the site plans and operations plans. And that's something we had paid for in the past, or wanted to pay for in the past, site plans and operation plans to ensure safety and ensure proper flow and everything. Providing means for public safety and public health that alternative to traditional law enforcement. So, for example, it doesn't have to be this, but in the past we've talked about the Guardians as a alternative security for an event we have. And in the past, we also talked about having a medical tent brought in that could do first aid and other immediate issues that could be taken care of without having someone transported out. While we will be handling the community engagement, I think we don't have an in-house graphic design and production crew. So we would want to work, especially for the physical aspects of design and of a visual festival. So they would handle that. Sound, stage, and lighting. Again, that was something that's been in our past proposals, as something we cannot do in-house. And then assisting us in the permits, which we will apply for the permits if we need any. But technical assistance on past practice that a consultant would have experience in would all, of course, be appreciated. In terms of budget, there's definitely a discussion to have here. So we've allocated $55,000 in our current budget for a festival. We have about $40,000 remaining in special projects, plus or minus $5,000 there. So 35, maybe 45. In the past, we've had matching from UCSB and SBCC Foundation of a total of $35,000. The UCSB 30,000 was a reallocation of the Sunfest event that used to happen at Stork Plaza. And the SBCC Foundation is new money, or was going to be new money. Excuse me. And then there's other funding sources that we were looking to take on last time that we just weren't able to because of COVID-19, but associated students, other public agencies, sponsorship and advertisement. That was a goal last time to bring that in. And then I put in this time, we have the COVID-19 emergency funds reimbursement. Part of it is us even being reimbursed for our Deltopia and Halloween 2020 and 2021 outreach for COVID safety. We're going to get around 51,000 hopefully from there. So that's another potential source. The committee discussed the budget to be 120 to 150 in total, including all these partnerships and funding sources. And again, in the past, the proposals have had costs for community engagement, but we can do some of that in-house now. So that might not be a cost moving forward. And again, if you wanted to see, I'll pull up these budgets so you can get a sense of what was proposed in the past. So this is the lowest level version of the event we had, we were about to have before COVID. It was $77,000. And this would have been, where we funded it, CSD and our two partners. And then again, look, a lot of the spending was on shade structures, entrance art, site operations, planning for the event. So that's, I think we'd need a lot of these this purple section, we need all of this again. And that's what the deliverables are tied to. But then the proposals in the past to the board have been even greater. They've gone up to the 150,000. There was a $184,000 budget where we had a very large scope planned out there. But the 180,000 level is not where the committee was had a preference for, is the 120 to 150. And the period of performance, we hope to pick this consultant by the second meeting in January, and then the event date would be on April 2nd, 2022, which is discernible from checking the academic calendar for UCSB. It's the first Saturday back when the spring quarter starts, traditionally when we would want to have this event. And this is the legal analysis on operation of community facilities, which would be various public spaces or temporary spaces. So that's the report. Yeah, definitely if the committee wants to jump in on anything else.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think that's a really thorough report of everything that we talked about. I'll just say that, it was so great to see that we were able to do alternative programming during Halloween to give people something to do. The biggest thing that we hear is that there's just a lack of safe and healthy alternatives during these big festival weekends, and providing people with that outlet is so beneficial to our community's health and safety. And I really envision this as something that can help accomplish that goal. And while in Halloween, we're not really diverting much energy because there's no energy that really exists, it's been, there's been no crowd on Halloween for the last 6 years. During Deltopia, we do still see attendance. And so the added benefit I really feel with this, with doing a organized event during Deltopia, is that hopefully we can divert some of that energy away from some of the activities that we know aren't as healthy, aren't as safe, and into a positive outlet. And I think we've laid a really solid foundation for that with all of the conversation we've had over the last number of years. It's great now that as we are sort of coming out of the worst of the pandemic, it is now an option for us to be able to use these sorts of approaches, whereas it wasn't over the last year or in 2020 when we had to cancel the planned event. And on top of that, we have more capacity at our disposal. We have more staff capacity with an additional person hired specifically for community engagement. And on top of that, we now manage the community center. So we have a facility that I feel is such a natural fit for this type of programming. And I'll leave it to Carrie and Catherine if you want to talk more about sort of the vision that we talked about for arts and culture in an event like this. Director Flaherty.
Yeah, I think our hope is that it will really be representative of our Isla Vista community. I know this is something that we brought up when we signed on to the letter about the movie that was going or is in production. But something that was really of concern was that it wasn't representative of our community now. And I think that this is a really great way that we can provide some structure and organization to this weekend, make sure there's safe and healthy events for people to go to and really celebrate who we are as a community, and also make sure that we're supporting our businesses, our local artists, musicians. And so I'm really excited about this as a possibility for the first week back in spring. Oh, and also something else, sorry. And also I think that this could also be a way to almost celebrate spring in general, not just spring quarter, but the changing of the seasons. And I think that this could turn into a really great tradition of just renewal and hope, and bring that momentum into the spring and summer months.
Thank you for that, Director Flaherty. Director Topliff, is there anything that you'd want to add? Okay, so with that, I think an additional thing that we might want to discuss tonight, outside of deciding, to float the RFP, is also sort of the scope for what we want the event to look like. I know that when Catherine and Carrie and I talked, we looked at all of the options that are in the memo under the draft project and deliverables heading, including streets, parks, community center, and or other temporary community facilities. And kind of came away with the feeling that an approach that included the community center and potentially included a street closure to help support our local business community, similar to what we considered in the spring of 2020 leading up to last year's Deltopia. And that would require some additional planning. And as we know, there's a permit that needs to be filed for something like that. But I think an approach that has those two elements could be really successful. And I'd love to hear what my colleagues have to say about that.
I'm always the first one. I keep waiting. I wait. I do wait. Okay. I have a couple things to say. One is I really wonder how the committee envisions working collaboratively with the IV Rec and Parks District, because it seems like there needs to be coordination, communication, collaboration with them, given that they operate the parks. And my understanding, I didn't attend, but my understanding was during Halloween that they did really nice event, that they worked with Lucidity. And I would hate to have IV Rec and Parks District doing their own thing and Ivcsd doing our own thing that same weekend. And that definitely could happen. So, and I know that this proposal calls for both entities to work together, but given some of the, let's just say, tension in the past, it seems like it might behoove the CSD to, on the front end, work with IV Rec and Park District before the board approves specifics, because it just seems like it might be nice if both entities are in partnership, arm in arm, as opposed to Ivcsd leading this, given the fact that I think that you would want to have some park involvement. So that's one thing. I make that comment. And I wondered if anybody had any experience with how the Guardians operated during the Halloween event, if how that was received by people during that Lucidity and IVRPD did. That's all.
Jonathan, do you want to speak to the Guardian element?
I don't know how they worked out on Halloween weekend, but I've heard the positive reviews. They do the Apple Store downtown, and I've experienced them there. They seem, but it's a totally different situation. But I don't know how they did on Halloween weekend. I didn't hear about that.
Got it. Well, good to know. I'll say I think you answered your own question in the while you were asking it, Director Deschler. I think that the envision is that this is a collaborative effort, and we're in constant communication with one another in order to make sure that we are not stepping on each other's toes, but also fulfilling our responsibilities to the community as a government agency that is responsible for the community center and has also really been leading this effort over the last 3 years to try and bring an organized event during this weekend, where at least in the past, everyone has kind of thrown their hands up and said, well, we don't want any part of this. This is something that's too controversial for us because we don't want to riot on our hands. That's what I've heard, from many folks and many folks at UCSB as well, about why UCSB didn't want to play a leading role in this. And so I think that
UCSB is not going to play a leading role in an Isla Vista event. Come on.
Well, I'm just throwing
UCSB's job.
I went back and I was watching the festival ordinance hearing at the County Board of Supervisors in 2017, and a majority of the Board of Supervisors stated publicly in 2017, before we were ever formed, we want organized events in Isla Vista during these festival weekends in order to divert that energy away. And so this is not a new concept. It's been talked about. It's been out there for years. I know that it was something that was really born out of the Associated Students organizing after the unfortunate happenings during 2014. And I say that all just because I want to situate us in the process of, this is not a new thing that we're considering. We've been talking about this for 3 years, and the community's been talking about it for a lot longer.
Yeah, and that's why the university does programming on campus, because they've been part of the conversation. I always feel, Spencer, you're chastising me, so I'll just throw that out there. But in any case, that's okay. Maybe I'm just sensitive tonight. But I just wanted to make one other comment, and I hate to be the downer person about this, but I just want to put it out there on the record, is that there has been this new COVID, whatever it's called, whatever it's called, the O one. And I just...
Omicron.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew it was something robotic. And so I just do think that we ought to just be aware of that as we're approving an RFP that we don't know exactly what's happening with this new variant.
Excellent point. And I think maybe that's something that we can work into our contracts as far as having a sort of I don't want to say an escape clause, because if we do have a contract with someone, we want to make sure that they're made whole for their labor, but just procedures for monitoring what the public health outlook looks like. I'm sure that Ross and Jonathan will have ideas about that in the future when we get to that point. Okay, I see a hand from Director Freeman.
I actually found the raise hand feature. I've been looking, they moved the button now under the reactions panel from the participants panel, and I've been hunting for it for quite a while. I think everyone can predict what I'm going to say, but again, I'm going to just put this on the record so that because it's related, my job is on this board in order to explain why I do the things that I do. So I definitely agree with some of the earlier comments that this is something that I think that should be coordinated with the Parks District. I will go maybe further in strength to say that this is something that I think should be coordinated strongly with the Parks District before the point that it even necessarily got to here. I will then even go even more strongly, of course, and say that I also think that the Parks District should be driving these processes and not the Community Services District. Now, I largely agree with the goal of these discussions. I've long believed that it was and was one of the people who was actually for a while on the forefront of frustration over, will somebody please step up and be the person to run this event? Something that I've had discussions with even people at the sheriff's department who were like poking at me about the fact that I was the guy who kept insisting people do that, even though they felt that there were issues with that. But I believe that the organization that should step up to do that is the Park District. And to the extent to which we feel that the Park District has failed us on that, I believe that that is something that we should take to the Parks District, whether it be in public comment or whether it be running for the board of the Parks District, because the Parks District is the group that is in charge of recreation, particularly recreation that is in parks. And I think that when we start talking about this event, it ends up largely being not now events that are happening inside of our building or inside of a room that we control, but are events that are happening out on the streets and are happening out on the parks. And this document even explicitly lists parks as one of the destinations. I do happen to know that the Parks District has been working on a series of spring concerts, which for what it's worth, I would think of as alternative programming to Deltopia, particularly if you're trying to figure out how to diffuse interest in a big event, maybe having lots of small events that occur over a period of weeks. Makes it so that people end up spreading all of that high focus demand on one day across an entire month. They are working on a spring concert series that my understanding will be even better than the concert series they had been doing for the fall that was apparently somewhat successful, despite all of the interesting issues that we've had with COVID. I continue to be uncomfortable voting on going forward, spending a lot of district money on running events, on contracting for events, on bringing in organizers for events. And I'm also uncomfortable. In this case, I do question some of the legality here. I realize there's, Ross disagrees. I mean, we don't have to go into the explanation because my thought process here, and I totally appreciate Ross's thought process. I don't even explain my side just to make certain that we don't have to waste time on it. I will be voting no on this today. I kind of wish we were spending a lot of this time working on how we will expand the knowledge of our rental housing mediation program, going back to the all of the work that we've been working on police reform that someone had dropped, as we now move back into this idea of, okay, well, Halloween, we were working on a bunch of events, now we're starting to work on the Deltopia events again. It just seems like a weird set of even priorities at that level, but that's my thought process, and I know no one agrees with me. I was shocked the last time we changed something, but I mean, thank you for the time.
Well, maybe I'll shock you again by saying I think maybe something that would be useful actually is for us to narrow the scope of the event that we're trying to do here and make it clear that our intention is to throw something in the community center or on the streets, because I think that at least that's from what our event committee talked about. That's what we think is probably the best approach, and something that, doing a street closure, it's a lot of work. It's possibly even more work than what the festival ordinance calls for, that we were all staring down the barrel of when we were trying to create a Halloween event. And so it's something that, we'd handle the administrative costs of, or potentially would be able to handle that. But I think that if we're asking consultants, event planners to propose us an event, we should make sure that we narrow the scope to say it's the community center and a street closure. Director Deschler.
For a street closure, is that process we would go through Public Works?
Yes.
And then for the festival ordinance, it's no amplified music during the day, and that's the problem. That's the difficulty that we would run into, is amplified music during the day or amplified music at night. Amplified music at night. I'm just trying to look at people's heads.
My understanding is the festival ordinance is in effect from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And so it's the night music that is an issue, and UCSB associated students have their concert to try and help get folks off the streets that I'm assuming will continue on this year, in the evening hours to fill that portion, because the campus is exempt from that ordinance.
No, we're not exempt.
Okay. Agree to disagree, but
6 p.m. to 7 a.m., just FYI.
Thank you, Director.
Blackout.
Yes, no one throw a party at 6 a.m. Okay, so I think that that all makes sense. Does anyone have any other comments on this item? Cool. Well, before we make a motion and continue, I'll open it up for public comment. If anyone has a request to speak, you can hit the raise hand button or you can put something in the chat. And I see a hand from Mark. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I just want to applaud the Ivcsd for coming out as a leader in Isla Vista on this front. I think that's ultimately why I side with Isla Vista or the Ivcsd, really going out front on this, because I think what we've continued to see is the Parks District not being a leader and really, like, in my opinion, failing its residents. And I don't feel like that's too strong of a language to use. And so I really think there's a vacuum and there's a need. And so I want to appreciate the Isla Vista Ivcsd doing what it's doing. I understand there's like tensions and sensitivities, but frankly, like, I think this is the time when Deltopia, or the Spring Festival, is the time when you can really show and really have kind of evidence of what government can do for its citizens. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And so I would really advocate for this. I'd advocate for a large budget, and I'd advocate for the CSD really like taking the lead on this, because I think someone has to. And I also think like doing this now in November is like a really healthy amount of time for planning and such to happen, and coordination between intergovernmental agencies is really important. So yeah, I want to support this. I want to support the Jonathan was showing all of the various budgets. I want to support something like big and robust, because I think this is like, that's what it will take to have culture change in Isla Vista, is something that's like big and alluring, and it can't be just like little things here and there. I mean, it can be, but I just don't think it's as effective. And so I'd really encourage the CSD to go big, do something amazing, really. And if things need to be scaled back the next year, like, learn from that. But let's see what could possibly happen in the best sense. Like, what's the best the Ivcsd could do? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mark. Are there other members of the public that wish to speak? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. And I'll also ask one other question to staff as far as the RFP goes. Would what you bring back have a specified amount of a budget, a top line number that the consultant could propose for?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a range like we have in here, 120 to 150, but I assume everyone's going to put 150. So we can just decide on a fixed price that we're okay with. So up to 150 or up to 120 or something in between. So fixed price, I think, is the cleanest way to do it, but we can do a range as well. I just think a range will make everyone put the max.
And can you remind us what the top line number was for the event that we were going to throw in 2020 that was canceled?
77,000.
Got it. So having heard that, I think I'm comfortable with a range of around 80 to 100,000. That's in line with the money that we have budgeted in special projects and in the festival line item, and see what folks put together. I think you're right that people will probably come in on the higher side, but also just like we did in 2020 and in 2019 when we were working with Lucidity to put the proposal together, if there are things that we see in a proposal once we have one selected that don't quite work out, then we can adjust it and try and work to lower that cost. And I also expect that because we have more capacity, as far as the marketing side and the community engagement side of things goes, that potentially that will be another way for us to save on costs. So just throwing that out there, and I'll see if other board members have feedback on that. Director Topliff.
I'm actually wanting to ask a separate question, which has to do with the $30,000 that we are expecting from UCSB, but it hasn't actually been committed. So would that make a difference in our budget when we got that either confirmed or not confirmed?
Yeah, I would say it's something that was committed at one point that we would need to ask again for, and you know, it's funds that were at one point allocated for an event that were being reallocated to this essentially. So a lot has changed though, because this event now hasn't happened since 2019, so it'll be 3 years. But I think we would need to make the same ask of both organizations again. So that'd be another, we would want to bring in that other 35,000.
I misunderstood on the 30,000 from UCSB. So that 30,000 is not part of the annual 120,000 that the university gives to Ivcsd. It was a separate amount.
It was totally separate. Yeah, it was amount that was the Sunfest funding, which was mainly, buying a lot of free food and giving it out as a harm reduction approach.
Yeah.
In Stork Plaza, as people were like walking from campus to Isla Vista. So we said at the time, oh, this event would make more sense in Isla Vista. We will host it. Just give us the money and it'll be a co-sponsored thing.
Yeah, I would definitely say it would be important to make a separate ask early for that 30,000.
I think that's a great idea. I think that we should not bank on getting either of the pools of money, but what we should do is we should engage both partners early. I know even since the last time that we made the big ask to UCSB, we have collaborated on a number of things with the Office of Student Life, and we're working with them last year on our proposal too. And last year they were very supportive of reallocating that funding over to the CSD for that project in Isla Vista, even though it didn't end up going through, at the time because of COVID. So I think we've got a solid foundation there, and we can be in touch very quickly. We also have a solid amount of lead time to figure it out, seeing as we're discussing it on the last day of November this year.
I think one thing I'll add is in terms of the budget, like what Spencer mentioned, I think the range 80 to 100, it's what we have allocated. He's right, like 55 plus the 40. If we did get the UCSB money last time, that money was also mainly aimed at a few specific things like the free food element. So I think if we could say we put out our scope with that range of what we have in our budget, and then if we get this other fund, it could just expand the scope, but it doesn't need to be something we pay the consultant more for. We were just going to pay for the food directly ourselves last time and get the funds from UCSB. So we don't have to hedge our bets on the main event, getting the funding, and then the funding could come into support or expand the scope, depending on what we feel is good.
I see a hand from Director Topliff, and then I'll go back to Director Deschler.
I think mine's still up from before. I'll lower my hand.
Okay, Director Deschler.
Yeah, I was going to, okay, I'm going to lower myself. I was going to make a comment about the cost of street closure for public safety and also public works. Is that funding built into that number? Because did we anticipate closing the street before, and so that the cost of signage and extra patrols or whatever, is that built into that number? That's what I want to ask.
It's not. The Isla Vista Fest 77,000 didn't include a street closure, but it did include the 6 deputies for the whole day to be there, and that was a cost of 3,000. So if we did a street closure, that's, I think, how many deputies we'd need for that as well. And so it would be about that amount, 3,000. So it's not actually we didn't have an actual budget made yet for our RFP, since we're having the discussion today. But when we put something as an RFP and at the next meeting to approve, we also will make that cost directly ourselves. It won't be I wouldn't expect the consultant to make those costs on the street closure. It would be something we contract for.
I would just also add that when we had the cost of the contract with the sheriff's office for the deputies to staff the event, that was when we were looking at throwing an event in the parks that would have been much larger. Whereas what we're considering here is much smaller, and the street component, at least the way that I'm envisioning it, is more of an open streets sort of dining and festivities type of thing, and not exactly like an event per se. If that makes sense. So I'm we'll have to have our conversations with the sheriff's office leadership as far as that goes once we have a fleshed out description of what the event looks like. But I'm hopeful that we will be able to have a reduced cost as far as that goes too, since the event would be scaled back from what it was when we considered it 2 years ago. Okay, I still see a hand from you, Director Topliff. Is that still, that's Zoom? Okay, yeah. Okay, any other comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion. I think it would be good to specify in the motion the total funding range, as well as the amendment to specify that the event is a street closure and at the community center. So I think the elements would be to direct staff to return to the board with an RFP for the event planning consultant that includes a downtown street activation and a local arts festival at the community center in the amount of, I think what did we say the range was, 80 to $100,000?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, I will make that motion. I don't often make motions, but I feel this is one of the most important things that we've considered. So I'm proud to make it. Okay, any other comment or feedback from the board? Any other feedback from members of the public? All right, seeing none, Jonathan, can you do a roll call vote?
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Freeman,
No.
Deschler,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Sorry, I think my computer froze a little bit. I think we finished the vote. Carrie, did you get a chance to vote?
But I'll say yes.
Okay. Motion passes 5-1. We'll look forward to that at a future meeting. We're going to move now to 4.3, the first amendment to the Isla Vista Community Center Agreement.
Okay, so this is a simple, let me do the share screen real quick. This is just a simple amendment to the community center agreement. We had a request from the Goleta Valley Library to do a library book drop box at the community center, and the county felt important that we had a contract that made it clear that it's not their responsibility to maintain it and it's ours. So this is what, once we approve this, we'll get it signed and we'll get the drop box installed out of the right of way, or path ADA paths, but in a very visible location in front of the community center.
All right, thanks for that description, Jonathan. This all seems simple enough. Any questions from board members? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll move approval of the oh gosh, where is it? The vendor memo, is that it? No, I'm sorry. I will move approval of the first amendment for the IV Community Center Agreement.
I will second.
Thank you.
All right, made by Deschler, seconded by Freeman. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Deschler,
Yes.
Topliff,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. I want to skip to 4.5, and then after that, give everyone a chance for a 5-minute break, because I'm anticipating that we'll all have a lot of questions on the retirement memo. So let's go to 4.5. This is the resolution to allow us to continue to have remote meetings under the executive order emergency procedures. This is the same resolution that we've adopted at previous meetings, and it needs to be renewed each month in order for us to continue using those rules. I do want to just ask the board and the public to weigh in on, as far as, our public health situation in Santa Barbara County. It continues to slowly improve, and I wanted to see what folks thought about transitioning to hybrid meetings where the public could still participate remotely and directors could if they needed to as well. But the board would be able to also have an in-person location starting in January. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So for directors who participate remotely, is it required that those directors participate in a public space, or can they participate from a private space?
Council, you want to speak to that? I think that if we continue to renew the resolution, we continue to use the old rules, the new rules, the new procedures, emergency procedures, which means you can do it from a private space.
That's correct. The AB 361 was the measure that allowed for a slightly different departure from the original teleconferencing rules under the Brown Act. So you don't have to be in a public space. You don't have to post the agenda in accordance with the Brown Act, et cetera. And you don't have to have a quorum within the jurisdiction of the agency.
So Spencer, is what you're proposing that we continue with that aspect, but also have this hybrid that you're talking about so that people can meet in person if they choose that? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that's correct. And members of the public would continue to be able to participate remotely as well.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I like that idea.
All right, Director Friedman, I know honestly, the only reason we can ask this question is because Jay has worked hard to figure out the technology side of this. Which
and
I think
works. Based on both the a previous meeting that I was the one person in the room and everyone was gone, and then later reports, I worked out the kinks in the network in the building, I've also continued to use that hardware both for the demos at our meeting and the San Ynez Community Service District meetings, and so it works really well actually, and to the extent to which hybrid meetings can work. I do want to say that though, because I continue to believe that hybrid meetings are not an optimal solution. The people who are in the boardroom have a different experience than the people who are remote, and the people who are remote have a lower quality experience. And the extent to which we attempt to improve that is limited. And to the extent, and then I want to point out that from an accessibility perspective, the remote meetings are much stronger. The remote meetings offer the ability for people to be using software to doing auto transcription easily. The remote meetings allow people to be configuring audio much more easily. The remote meetings don't require physically transporting oneself to the physical meeting location and sitting in a likely uncomfortable chair and being unable to move or do anything during the course of that entire time. The remote meetings allow people to participate during the moments of the meeting that are most important. And so when we bias the meeting towards having in-person meetings at high quality, and then the remote meetings we continually make lower quality. And again, I've attempted to make it as high quality as possible, but the quality of this meeting is better than the quality of the in-person meeting. And to the extent to which then we've all spent time, and you can see from the various backgrounds and things people have here, we've all spent time working on our setups in order to improve things. My audio was a little bit broken today because I wasn't trying to improve it, and hopefully it's better now. Ross pointed out to me that my audio was broken earlier. In an attempt to make this the highest quality meeting experience that we can have. I do appreciate that there are people who don't have computers, and that the issue always comes up of, well, what to do with people who don't have computers. I feel like the the solution for that is to have a staff member, even a board member. I'm even willing to do it, take the bullet for it, just in order to, because I believe so strongly in remote meetings, to have one person at the location ready to allow people into the room and run a hybrid meeting of one person at the location in order to allow for everyone else to have separated video, separated audio for the meeting experience. So I'm not really for us jumping into the idea of doing hybrid meetings because I think it's a step back for our district. I do appreciate, though, that the underlying law is that we have to have meetings like that, and we're currently operating under these emergency, dispensations, and there were, now every 30 days we reapprove our ability to have meetings of this form. So it's eventually we're supposed to get back to that point, and maybe it's better to start transitioning now. I totally appreciate that, though. So not like staunchly opposed, but I will continue to point out that I believe that these meetings are better.
Yeah, I appreciate all of those comments because I think they paint the really complex picture of what that would look like. I think maybe what would be best is for us to have staff evaluate the different options that we have and talk about it once we're agendized to talk about it at our next meeting. Just wanted to throw it out there for everyone to start considering it because I also, as you have, Jay, I think hear from folks that, we used to hear from a lot that would come into our meeting and participate that don't have that technological access and have been kind of technologied out of it. And at the same time, I also think there is an inherent civic good in elected officials being accessible, not just in the virtual realm, but also in the in-person realm as well. And so I think it's something that we should grapple with, but just wanted to throw it out there for us to start thinking about it and what a transition to a hybrid model would look like. And I saw there was a public comment in the chat from Mark supporting meeting with a remote option. Just wanted to point that out. Are there any other comments from members of the public? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and we need to adopt this resolution. Does anyone have a motion?
I'll make that motion to adopt AB 361.
I will second.
Made by Topliff, seconded by Freeman. Director Flaherty, was your hand up?
Sorry, it was to make the motion.
Got it. All right, sounds good. Any other comments from the board? All right, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director
Before
Flaherty?
you take the vote, sorry to interrupt. There was a comment from Mark V in the chat. I just think it'd be appropriate to read that into the record before the directors take their final vote. He indicated he had to run to another engagement, but he strongly supports meeting with a remote option. Thank you.
Spencer did read that as far as I remember. So.
Oh, sorry. I was writing down notes. I didn't hear it. My apologies.
No worries. Thanks, Ross. Mark's got his comments in there twice. All right. Jonathan, you want to do roll call?
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Flaherty?
Yes.
Director Dessler?
Yes.
Topliff?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. We're going to recess for 5 minutes. We'll be back at 7:55 for the item 4.4. All right, hey everyone. I've got 7:55, so I think we're gonna come back. And I will reconvene the meeting at 7:55. We're going to move to item 4.4, the 457B vendor memo. Jonathan, I think you are muted.
My bad, and I lost my mute button. Oh, so where was I? So here's just before I introduce the memo itself, it does have a little recap here, but earlier this year in May 2021, we had our staff benefits and pay ad hoc committee. It met for a number of months, working with me and Deborah at the time to come up with a list of recommendations for our pay and benefits. And one of them was that we should establish a 457B retirement plan for our employees. And that's been the benefit that's been on the job descriptions for the 2 employees we have hired this year and the job postings that we have had out there. So it is something we've committed to that we need to get done. We did have some challenges though getting that done because Deborah was out. So we have our consultant management partners now having done the legwork, and this is just round 1. We do have to take a second action if this is acceptable to the board on December 14th. But let me just walk through this today, and if this is the direction you all are okay with, we will bring back the contract and the necessary resolution for establishment on the next board meeting. So what we're recommending today is that we move forward with PARS, Public Agency Retirement Services, as our vendor for the 457B retirement plan. The few of you here, I think 2 of you here who were on the board in 2019 would remember we got a presentation from PARS at the time, and we chose not to move forward with them for a number of reasons, and some have actually been addressed in this latest negotiation. We did look into several different entities to look for vendors. Some of these were the list that our committee had come up with back in May, and others are additional ones that our consultant looked into. We got 4 proposals from them, and 2 were really viable, Lincoln and PARS, and we assessed both, and the recommendation is to move forward with PARS. So here's a really nice chart. Our consultant's doing great work for us. Here's a really nice chart of the pros and cons of the 2 that were the top proposals. With PARS, I just want to address the concern. So it had high cost. That was one. And they were concerned about like how the investment vehicle works, like how the employee gets to invest their retirement funds. That, like, there was a concern about the way that PARS did it at the time in 2019. So we were able to negotiate a reduced fee for PARS. We were going to waive the setup fee, and we brought down the monthly fee to $250 from $400. So that was something good that our consultant did on our behalf. And then in terms of the concerns of the investment offerings, I think as they looked into it, they said that was pretty standard of the kinds of, like Lincoln, which was the other offerer, actually had worse of an investment support and more on the district to administer. So it seems like that's just what the industry standard is. So that concern with PARS is alleviated, and the fee issue was alleviated in us being able to negotiate several reductions in their charges. So here's some other good changes we got. So no late payments, no interest on late payments. That's great. Moved the court to Santa Barbara County, and clear language on compliance amendments. So that's that, I mean, at this point, we do need to, if we want to start, I think it says this earlier, if we want to get the benefits started on January 1st for our employees, we do need to adopt a resolution now, or in the next month, before December 31st. So if this seems amenable to the board, we can move forward with bringing the resolution contract. If not, we can keep looking. We just have a more further out start date, but I do think it's important to make good on this commitment that the district has made already. And I do agree. Like, I've looked at the PARS investment vehicle. I don't have that presentation for you today. I actually just received it hours before the meeting and wasn't able to attach it. But I looked at it and it's pretty similar to what Fidelity had for us, and that's what we were using for our simple IRA, which was our previous plan offering. So I honestly don't think that is much of an issue now that I'm, actually using one of the other options out there. Fidelity didn't even couldn't work with us. We were not big enough to work with them, which was the preferred to move in. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think one last point I'll make is that the PARS is well known in the public agency sphere, and one thing the consultant did note, I did share with him that we have thought about, like, maybe in the future we will be in CalPERS. We're not, we anticipate that as a long-term thing that might be necessary, and PARS would be easier to transition to that in the future if that's where we wanted to go, or we can stick with PARS and it would also be fine. So yeah, I just want to see if you all had anything to say on this, and if not, we could move forward to the next meeting with the approval documents. But I just didn't want to bring that all at once before we had chance for board input.
Thanks for that presentation, Jonathan. Do any board members have questions? Director Freeman.
I have a question combined with an apology. Jonathan had asked me for a video of a prior meeting for, I believe, these consultants. And then I found the video, and then we didn't coordinate getting the video to them. And I realized I just kind of assumed that maybe it's a lower priority, but I saw in some email a few days ago that I guess it was actually a high priority. And so is there anything going wrong with the fact that you don't have the video? I can just give it to you on a USB key. That's what I do for the high priority meetings. I can give it to you
No, it's totally okay. It was just to help in the negotiation so that he could do, he could know exactly what they had talked last time and what we had said so that he could negotiate better. But I think he's been successful in a lot of the negotiation points in terms of reducing the fees. Because I shared with him, I said, I remember what we had talked about was the cost was high and the investment vehicle was not to par, I guess, of what the board thought would be good. And so he knew that. He just wanted to see the specifics of what had been said. But I think he did a good job of getting the fees down for us.
I'll add something, which is, as other board member that was on the board when we did have the presentation from PARS, I remember that the concerns that the board had at the time were about the investment vehicle, about the costs, but I think it was the underlying concern was that we had kind of we had a presentation from them, but we hadn't really considered and evaluated other options, and so that was giving us pause because choosing a retirement vehicle is an important decision to make, and so in this context where we have had our management consultant go out and research the issue, get offers from different vendors, and are now feeling comfortable enough to make a recommendation, I think for me the calculus is a little bit different. I'm very happy with how thorough this report is and explaining the two different plan proposals side by side, I think is really helpful. I had one question about something that's in the report, which is the under the additional considerations subheading on page, I believe this is the third page. They talk about the Calabasas adoption of the system and replacing their Social Security contribution I think with PARS is what that's saying, ongoing savings from eliminating employer contributions to Social Security. Is that something that we would do as well, is eliminate the Social Security payroll tax because we have this other vehicle?
It's not something we have to do. It's something we could do, and that's something I remember that Bob used to talk a lot about. So what this is referring to is if we have a lot of temporary part-time employees, like our dirt riders and our interns, for example, and we pay Social Security tax for them right now. And what this another option we'd have with PARS that Calabasas did is we could do their retirement through PARS so that they can have more immediate access to their funds. So, Social Security, they'd get access to it in 40 years or more, and this would give them more immediate access to their retirement contributions from the district. So it would need to be, it's separate from establishing a 457B. It's just that it's something PARS could do too.
Got it. That's good to know. So we're moving forward with selecting a vendor tonight, but it would be a separate decision in order to eliminate that tax. That is something that I think we should look into. I think for all the reasons you just mentioned, it's more flexible, and if we're providing it through an alternative means, we could realize cost savings, in terms of taxes that we're paying right now. I will also just say, I think that having seen the comparison and the recommendation, this makes sense. It makes sense to go with a vendor that works with public agencies and that understands our concerns and that has that experience. I was definitely concerned about the item on the table that mentioned that the other vendor might want to put more of the administration of the plans on district staff. And I don't think that that's something that we want to use our limited capacity for right now. So I'm happy to hear that's not a concern with PARS and makes me feel comfortable moving forward with them. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay. So I think the motion would be to bring back a contract with PARS. Is that right, Jonathan?
Yeah, and an authorizing resolution.
All right. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I will.
All right. Made by Topliff. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Seconded by Freeman. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and we'll do a roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Deschler,
Yes.
Topliff,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. And we will have that item back soon. So next, we're going to move on to our agenda to the next item, which is our reports. First, reports from members of the board. Does anyone have a report they want to give? All right. I am not seeing any. I'll add one thing. This is kind of boring, but I finally was able to get access to our Fin system so that we can help Jonathan process some of those claims in the accounting system, and got trained by our former director, Bob Geis, last week on how to do that. And it's been good to start helping out and also get to learn the system a little bit more. It's fun to just poke around the finances and see how the system works. So happy to report that. It took a long time. It took a number of months to actually get the access, but it's working now, which is really good. And I also just want to say a big thank you to everyone on our board and members of the public that were there for the Isla Vista Transportation Town Hall. I thought that was a really successful outreach event, and I want to thank Jonathan and Sydney for working so hard and putting that together. we are back to doing outreach the way that we found a lot of success in the early years of the district, the grassroots of getting out there, knocking on doors and talking to people. I had so many great conversations talking to folks about transportation concerns in the community and what improvements they'd like to see. And at least one of those folks actually showed up to the meeting, which was pretty cool. And we got great feedback at the meeting as well. So just big thank you to staff for putting that together, and looking forward to see how the STEP grant process continues to unfold. I see a hand from Director Freeman.
I always think of something after your carefully organized sequence of events. I'm always sorry about that. So 2 weeks ago, there was a housing crisis town hall at UCSB that some of us attended. Myself, Spencer, and Ethan was on the panel, as was Jonathan Aboud. And Jonathan, I'm not sure whether because our last meeting was 3 weeks ago. I don't know if anyone has actually mentioned anything about that. I arrived a little bit late, so I missed Henry Yang's comments. I think this matters a lot to us because of our rental housing mediation component. And so I'm always trying to make certain people understand that we offer those services. One of the things that had come up during that meeting that I want to point some attention to is the number of students who are staying at hotels that UCSB is organizing, and some of the housing quality issues that they've been experiencing while living in hotels, and some of the issues just inherently in living in hotels related. And one thing that's specifically been brought up is apparently they were having issues with water quality. I bring that up as a setup then really for last week on Thanksgiving. There was currently the Sheriff's Department has been describing it, although they're apparently not even entirely certain what had happened yet, a murder-suicide at the Best Western Hotel in Goleta, which is one of the hotels that students are staying at due to the housing crisis issues. And that is something that I've not seen addressed in any of the articles on the topic yet. And I talked with somebody at Nexus about that, but I think there's some extra sensitivities maybe with relation to the students who are there and what they might be feeling with relation to being stuck in this housing option now with an actual shooting that had occurred at the facility. And it was that hotel and the hotel next to it, the Kimpton. There's a number of students who are staying between the two of them. So I just wanted to bring this up because I'm concerned how else to make certain that everyone connects the dots there, because again, I haven't seen articles that really note this connection. So
I would just comment that there are obviously students in hotels.
You accidentally turned mute back on.
I'm so sorry. But that housing has done a really good job at, well, I shouldn't qualify. Housing has organized an infrastructure to provide support for students who are in hotels. So they have their special staff that are assigned to the hotel, to the students that are in hotels. There's a special a newsletter that provides all different kinds of information to the students. So I just wouldn't want to create the impression that these students are out in the Netherlands and nobody thinks of them. There is a good support network around the students that are in the hotels, and obviously the goal is for these students to be on campus.
Thank you for that, Director Freeman and Director Deschler. I found the housing town hall really insightful, and the concerns that residents shared really heartbreaking, and where I know we're all hoping for a solution to the crisis sometime soon. So I think Catherine, you also attended virtually as well after the fact too, and got to hear about all those concerns. And yeah, appreciate you reminding me about that, Jay. I was looking at the calendar looking, is there any meeting I should mention that I went to? And that one popped up. So thank you for that. Any other reports from board members? All right. And in relation to that meeting, big shout out to Jonathan and Ethan for representing us very well. And I really appreciated Jonathan's explanation of the history of how we got to this situation that we're in now, because it was very thorough and good. We're going to go to reports from standing and ad hoc committees. I think we had our festival weekend committee report on the agenda tonight. Is there any other committee reports that should be mentioned? Not seeing any. We'll move on to report from district council.
Just that I've had my booster, so I am vaxxed to the max, as I like to say. I've been coordinating with Jonathan on when we might be returning to in-person meetings, and I'll just keep doing that and light up the board's action this evening to renew the remote meeting options under AB 361. So I'll anticipate resuming seeing you all in person starting in January, unless something changes to warrant some type of modification to that. And other than that, nothing else.
Thank you, Council. We'll move to General Manager's report.
Okay, so a couple things. Yeah, I wanted to give an additional shout out to the STEP grant transportation town hall. Yeah, Sydney did an amazing job in organizing our outreach to get that high number of attendees. So it was pretty great to see that many people attend a district event. So we can see what we can actually do now with dedicated staff in that area. Compost Collective, things are going pretty smoothly there. We are replacing one of our dirt riders right now who had to resign for time constraints. We're in the grant process of applying for grants, which seems to be promising right now. And they're working on the board presentation of the program reviews. It's the first one in the budget cycle. So we're already back on the budget cycle starting next year in January. So they'll be presenting to the board their progress and their future outlook. Ivy Beautiful, we're needing to rehire some members of the crew, but some great things have been done there. They've established some regular routes for graffiti scanning and removal, and then also routes for trash pickup. So there's good organized daily work on per the routes now that I think is making things more efficient. And there's a schedule for landscaping the different medians and areas around the community that get overground. So creating some just more operation, like stable operations there. It's on Ivy Beautiful. It's been going really well. You all received the report from our interpersonal violence investigator, and you can see that she has been very busy with her caseload. I think I mentioned last time, but we're continuing to work with a student group who's looking at improvements to the rental housing mediation program and how that can be used more. We just got the initial results today from them. So we're moving forward and just looking at what we can do to make it easier to use this program, make it more accessible. At the next meeting, you'll be looking at the applications for the community advisory board for the community center. That's in progress right now. And we keep getting more users of the space, and a lot of them now looking into January reservations. So there's users. Our building assessment is once again delayed, but I think it's on a firm hard date now of January 4th in the afternoon to do the assessment of the community center and the clinic building. And we're going to hold off on the ADA section since the county seems to be doing the same scope right now. And it's actually going to be next Monday. I'll be meeting them for that. So we'll see the results of that and see if we need to move forward with more of our own. But for now, it looks like what they're doing is exactly the same of what we would have done. On the STEP grant, we're deep in data collection right now. And that's mainly what we're working on, and developing the community survey of collecting the needs assessment information. So that's our next step where we're at. Parking RFP, today was the deadline for the parking and the planning RFP. So we got 4 proposals for parking and 1 for planning. So we have our 2 ad hoc committees that have been working on both those. So we'll come back together now and review what we have and move forward, recommend something to the board. Another thing, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we might want to look at a retreat in January. So if you have topics in mind for a retreat, staff structure is definitely one, but any other topics that you're interested in, let's get them on the table and we can start working on them for next year. The audit's almost finished. And our consultant, they've completed their work on family medical leave process for us. They've almost completed the work on our retirement plan. We had a major breakthrough with the credit card. Apparently there was a form that was not filled out, that was not they never let us know that there was an additional form waiting to be filled out, even though the last email they sent does say you're done and complete. So not sure what's going on there, but we're going to fill out that last form now and get through that and finally have a credit card for the district. So, and I think that's pretty much it on my update.
Thank you for the update, Jonathan. Any questions from board members? All right, hard at work as always. Thanks for the update. I want to add one thing to my report, which I may have reported at a previous meeting, but I want to make sure that I do because I didn't take a note saying that I mentioned it, which is that I attended in mid-October, the County Board of Supervisors meeting about allocating American Rescue Plan funding, ARPA funding, and the Isla Vista Community Center renovations were one of the improvements that were being considered. In the October meeting, the board allocated funding for what they're calling Tranche 1, which are projects that were funded immediately. There is still funding available that will be considered for Tranche 2, and that is going to be considered in April of next year. And the county staff is still evaluating whether or not the community center project is an eligible use of that funding. From what I have heard, the indications seem good, but they need to go through their process of making sure that they're staying compliant with the millions of dollars they're receiving from the federal government. So just wanted to put that on everyone's radar, as we talk about the community center. And we've talked about improvements to it in the past, that's something that is coming down the road in April of next year that will be very important. So wanted to make sure, in case I hadn't reported it, that is something that's been going on. Director Deschler.
Yeah, one that made me think of something when you said Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, and I've seen a number of local governments holding special meetings on the redistricting process. And I wonder if there was value for our December 14th meeting is having an update on that process as it affects Isla Vista.
I think that would be valuable. Is that something that we can get on December 14th, Jonathan?
We can. How long do you guys want that meeting to go? It is a pretty long meeting, but we can have a quick update.
Yeah.
But we do have a packed agenda that day right now.
I think the good news is my understanding of their timeline is that they will have adopted a final map by that point, and so we will have an easy update to share, not about process, but about outcomes.
Right.
Thanks for that, Director Deschler. Any other comments from the board? Well, seeing none, thank you all. Our next board meeting will take place on December 14th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I will second.
Made by Deschler, seconded by Freeman. Any last public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call.
Dr. Brent?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Deschler?
Yes.
Topliff?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.